How do you outrun a ghost that feeds on fear? How does one fight something they can't see? In the late 1980s, a modest bungalow in San Pedro, California became the site of one of the most bizarre and well-documented hauntings in American history. A young mother named Jackie Hernandez reported a series of terrifying paranormal encounters in her home, from the apparition of a corpse-like old man to a disembodied floating head in the attic. The phenomena quickly escalated from mere sightings to unexplained lights, foul odors, and even a viscous, blood-like liquid oozing from the walls. As Jackie's pleas for help grew urgent, a team of investigators, led by veteran parapsychologist Dr. Barry Taff, arrived, only to find themselves under attack by unseen forces as well. What followed was a 2-year saga of poltergeist activity so intense that it allegedly endangered lives. It baffled experts, and ultimately followed Jackie from one residence to another. In today's episode, join me as I re-examine the key elements of the San Pedro haunting, its background and timeline, the documented paranormal activity, the investigators' findings, and subsequent developments, and also explore additional research, theories, and community reactions surrounding this unsettling case. So grab a drink and a snack, snuggle up and get comfortable and ready, because this is a case you certainly might just want to hear about, albeit for most, with the lights on. For others, the braver souls amongst us, turn the lights off if you dare. But first, this message is sponsored by Raycon. Keep your ears open and your holiday playlist rolling with Raycon's headphones. They're great for staying alert on a jog or just kicking back. And for Black Friday and Cyber Monday, you can save up to 30% on all Raycon audio products. I listen to a ton of music and podcasts when I'm doing housework or working out, and Raycons are perfect for multitasking. I can keep my playlist going while staying aware of traffic on my run or catching my podcast while shopping without tuning out everything around me. They're built for everyday, all-day use with 32 hours of battery life, IP68 waterproof and dustproof, so they're highly resistant to sweat, rain, and even sandy beach runs. Plus, they contain a fit that doesn't slip. Raycon gives you premium performance without the premium price tag. Their quality rivals the big audio brands at half the cost. And plus, over 3 million customers already love Raycon, and they come with a 30-day happiness guarantee. I've been seeking out a Raycon partnership for a long time, and I'd always heard great things, and I have to say now that I have a pair myself, that I'm cooked and hooked. These are not only affordable, but their quality is just so good. I'm an audiophile, and I tell you what, man, these earbuds are fantastic. So with Black Friday right around the corner, right now truly is the best time to check out all of Raycon's audio products. They're up to 30% off site-wide. And from everyday essentials to the latest releases, it's the perfect time to upgrade your sound or get ahead on gifting. These early deals definitely won't last long, so please shop now before they're gone. You can click the link in my description box or go to buyraycon.com/mysteryarchives. This is not a deal you want to pass on, I'm telling you guys. So make sure you support the channel and treat yourself by grabbing your own pair of Raycon earbuds today. Thank you for listening, and now let's get back to the content. Winter of 1988 in California. A woman by the name of Jackie Hernandez had just left her husband. Her marriage was rocky to say the least. A domestic drama, a story which is all too common in this world. Working with a limited budget, she had a small amount of things, her 2-year-old son Jamie, and was pregnant with her second child. What should have been a happy development that was now bittersweet due to being overshadowed by the problems presented by an unhappy marriage. She soon found a small house located in San Pedro that seemed like it could be just what she needed to get back on her feet. Although it would take some time, she was willing to do what she needed to do to get out of the marriage and take care of her children. Before the family would move into the home and begin to inhabit its walls, what they didn't realize was that they already weren't alone.
Jackie would later say that she always had a fear of someone breaking into her home, especially when she began to live alone, but that upon crossing the threshold of this new house, and although for a seasoned criminal it would have been all too easy to break into if they had so wished, that fear was somehow gone. At first, she said that she felt a presence, something that was not of this world, but that she felt almost protected and at ease, which was something she wasn't used to. This presence would begin to show itself in small but strange ways. The very first thing Jackie said she ever experienced was when she had friends over. One of her friends was sitting at a table near her in the kitchen, and the other on a couch in the living room. As she passed by another desk that held a cup full of pins, although several feet away, her and her friend in the kitchen were awestruck when the cup glided by itself across the table it was sat on and towards Jackie. It then collapsed to the floor, shattering the cup. Stricken with curiosity as to how that could have happened, they were confused and surprised to say the least. But not having the answers, before too long, this seemingly innocent strangeness would become a distant memory. However, the presence that Jackie had been feeling would begin to show its true intentions. In February of 1989, the activity seemed to escalate. As she wakes up, Jackie heads to her children's room to see if they're still asleep. Upon walking into the room, she is stopped dead in her tracks. Sitting beside her sleeping son, on the lowest bunk bed, is a man in a red flannel shirt and jeans. His skin is gray. His face looks angry. A living, rotting corpse is staring at her son. She is so scared, she can't even scream, even if she wanted to. The man glances at her menacingly and then vanishes. She panics and calls several friends to help her, but after they arrive, they find nothing. And this would only mark the beginning of the frightening specter revealing itself. Multiple of Jackie's friends and even her neighbor would witness things they couldn't explain in the months to come. The neighbor's name was Susan Castaneda, and in her words, she would later say, "At first, when Jackie said that she felt something, I didn't really believe her. I thought it was her own confidence in herself. But that was until the manifestations began to show themselves to her, and then to me. I don't know what it is that I saw, but I saw it. I smelled it. I experienced it. It touched me and it talked to me. It even visited my house to let me know that it was real." One night, as it stormed outside and rain tapped the glass of the windows of her bedroom, Susan was sound asleep. But as she slept, something supernatural was churning, like the storm outside her house. She was suddenly startled awake when she heard a massive banging noise in her room. However, this wasn't thunder that she was hearing. Her large antique lamp on the other side of her bed had somehow been moved. It had been thrown into the middle of the room and now laid in pieces. As she made this discovery, a flash of lightning illuminated the room, and standing before her was a man. His face was like that of a dead person. His eyes were angry. And suddenly, as quickly as the room lit up, as the illumination dissipated, he was gone. But something peculiar was left in his wake, a putrid and rotting smell. After the experience Susan had, which would be one of many to come, another friend by the name of Darlene, who would regularly babysit Jackie's children, Jamie and Samantha, while Jackie was at work, would have an experience of her own. One afternoon, as the children watched cartoons on TV in the living room, Darlene got up to use the restroom. As she stepped back into the hallway and headed towards the small home's bathroom, she was greeted by a voice that called out to her from inside the darkened room. It very intensely said, "Don't come back here." Later describing the voice as very creepy and spine-chilling, she did as she was told, fearing that if she didn't, whatever this thing was, would become violent. As the days passed, Jackie only became ever more restless, but the activity persisted, only becoming more aggressive and more visible. A strange liquid began to drip from the walls and various crevices throughout the house, with no logical origin. Weirded out by this, but not knowing what it was, Jackie would clean it up and just try to go about her day. However, whatever had been causing all of these events was far from finished. One evening, when placing a storage bin inside of her attic to try and conserve what little space she had, she felt as if she was being watched. To her shock and amazement, she began to see what she would later describe as a floating head coming towards her. But upon seeing the specter, it picked up speed dramatically. It came at her so quickly that she panicked and fell off the chair that had been propping her up to gain access to the attic. Following this incident, she began to hear loud noises emanating from the attic above, coupled by whispers coming from the small access door above her laundry room. Getting no sleep and reaching her breaking point, Jackie began to get desperate for some kind of help. Her friend and neighbor Susan had recently seen a show on TV of a crew who investigated the haunting of the Queen Mary, and after some digging, she was able to find their phone number. So at Susan's recommendation, Jackie gave them a call. After discussing what she had experienced, her point of contact passed the information along to the group, where she was then contacted back, and together they set up a time for all of them to meet and to begin a potential investigation. The group consisted of a fairly well-known parapsychologist and other professionals in assistive fields. The parapsychologist was Barry Taft, who had been involved in over 3,000 cases, and at one point investigated the same case that would later become famous for a movie adaptation known as The Entity. A professional cameraman named Barry Conrad also joined them. He had previously worked for NBC and ABC and had won multiple awards in his field for his expert work behind the lens. And lastly, a photography expert by the name of Jeff Wheatcraft would complete the main crew. Having spent multiple years as a photography expert in New York, he was well versed in debunking photos. He was also a well-known and heavy skeptic, an important piece when trying to remain scientific in a field such as this. All three would arrive for the first time at the San Pedro home on August 8th, 1989. Upon their initial surveying of the home, they would unanimously agree that it felt as if there was a massive pressure around them and in their ears. This pressure felt as if they were deep underwater. Alongside this, the home had a very peculiar scent. A foul and rotting type of smell seemed to permeate the air within its walls. After an initial walkthrough, the crew would then interview Jackie and Susan in the living room, where they were introduced to many of the details of what they both said they had experienced. Upon hearing Jackie's account of a disembodied head flying towards her in the attic, Jeff, although not voicing it at the time, didn't believe her. But knowing what they were there to do, he suggested that the group at least take a look in the attic to see if they could feel anything. He then volunteered to be the first to go into the attic, thinking that it would simply be empty and this lady was spinning a fantasy. As he climbed above the laundry room and into the space, flashlight and camera in hand, he began to walk around, and the first thing he noticed was that he felt as if he was being watched by something that he couldn't see, so much so that the hair on his body began to stand on end. Trying to shake the feeling that someone or something was practically breathing down his neck, Jeff began to take photos before he was going to descend back to the main level of the house. He snapped one photo, 2 photos, but upon snapping the 3rd photo, something, an invisible force, yanked his camera from his hands. Dumbstruck by what had just taken place, he screamed and ran, descending the attic as quickly as he could. Upon seeing the rest of the crew, white as a ghost himself, he took a minute or two to collect himself before working up the nerve to go and retrieve his camera. As he climbed back into the attic, Much more cautiously this time, he noticed that the camera wasn't anywhere near where he had been standing. Instead, the lens was standing up in one corner of the attic, and the body of the camera was in the complete opposite corner from where it had been pulled from his hands. He would retrieve it as quickly as he could and descend yet again. He would later say that after his initial experience, that he just knew in his soul that there had to be something up there. The group would further discuss a plan of action and continue to speak with the ladies in the living room until it was decided that Jeff and Barry would reascend into the attic together to try and record some kind of video of the space. However, every time that Barry attempted to take the camera up into the attic, it would shut off. Thinking that this was some kind of battery issue, he would go back down only for the video camera to come back on. During this troubleshooting process, Jeff was again targeted. He was pushed by unseen hands. He was pushed with so much force that he had to grab a hold of a wooden beam in the attic to keep from falling through the entrance. Upon making his way back down as well, thoroughly shocked by everything that he had experienced so far, the entire group was then startled into silence when a loud banging noise began to come from the far reaches of the attic itself. They hushed each other to listen. The following audio was taken at that very moment.
Shh, quiet. Damn.
There has been noises in this room that come from right in the center, right here.
Once it finally stopped, the group knew they were experiencing something they couldn't explain, and they were convinced that this was the real deal. Attempting to photograph whatever could have been making the noise, Jeff would partially put himself up into the attic to snap additional photos. He would then see multiple flashes of light, followed by what he described as a massive black shadow or presence that was huge and moving from side to side. The crew would then leave for the night shortly after this interaction and would plan to return several weeks later. However, shaken by what he had experienced, Jeff did not want to further participate. On August 28th of 1989, the remaining crew would return, and things at first seemed relatively quiet this time, not nearly as active as the first experience. And that was until about 4 a.m. Sitting in the kitchen, they began to see a strange liquid pour from inside the cabinets. This was the very same liquid Jackie had described to them that she had cleaned up several times before. The crew, since the opportunity presented itself, decided to take samples of this mysterious liquid and would have it sent off to a lab for analysis. As they collected samples from all over the house throughout the course of the night, they would also try and determine if there was any sort of potential, logical source as to where this liquid could be coming from. However, they would discover no pipes, no trickery. They had no valid explanation as to what could be causing this strangeness. The results from the lab once they were in were bizarre to say the least. The liquid was actually human blood plasma with a high concentration of copper and iodine, and the plasma had come from a human male. This stunned everyone and further deepened the mystery of this very unusual haunting. After this night, the crew planned to return after a short time while they examined the things they had captured thus far to try and determine just what could be causing the haunting. In the meantime, Jackie was left alone, or on rare occasion, with a friend. She would very often leave voicemails of what she was experiencing on Barry Conrad's answering machine. Shortly after their departure, one night as she was trying to sleep, the banging in the attic began again. As she sat terrified, waiting for it to stop, it would, but something new and equally horrifying would take its place. The sound of a deep, almost monstrous breathing began to manifest instead, and this manifestation made Jackie not only scared for her life, but come to the conviction that she wouldn't sleep in the house any longer, and certainly could not live there anymore. Various members of the crew would stay with Jackie to further investigate when their schedules would permit in the days to come. However, there was one night in particular that wasn't just an ordinary episode. No, this night was a matter of life and death. September 4th of 1989, drained and exhausted, Jackie Hernandez was now alone in the home once again. Barry had just left the previous night after capturing additional footage. But upon his return, and after convening with his colleagues, he would soon have a frantic voicemail waiting for him. And this voicemail was from the woman who he had just left. It was from Jackie. Screaming as things broke in the background, she would describe what happened like this. Almost as soon as Barry left, things began to go crazy in the house. Items like dishes, knives, and other things were being thrown across the room. It was trying to hurt me. My kids' toys were being levitated and then being ripped apart before my very eyes. Even more frightening, as Jackie was leaving the frantic voicemail as the activity surrounded her. Her phone line was cut mid-cry for help. The crew rushed down to San Pedro, but instead of picking her up and getting her as far away from the house as they possibly could, Jackie was surprised when the guys rushed inside the home with their equipment instead. At first glance, everything seemed to be calm, almost too calm. Jackie began telling the men that among the more chaotic activity she had been experiencing, she again had heard breathing and whispering coming from inside the attic. Jeff and a colleague named Gary of his decided that they would go up to investigate, with Jeff feeling not so great about being back in the home once again. It had been nearly a month since his initial visit and experiences. At 12:50 a.m., Jeff and Gary would crawl into the attic. Within minutes, Jackie and Barry would hear what sounded like 3 distinct snaps, like someone snapping their fingers. As Barry was holding his camera with both his hands, and Jackie was standing directly beside him, they would then yell to Jeff and Gary that the activity was on the surface level and to come back down from the attic. Gary, who was closer to the exit, began to make his way towards it, and Jeff, who had been in the center of the attic holding his flashlight, began to take his steps towards the exit as well. However, little did Jeff know that these steps would be ones that he would never forget. Before Gary's very eyes and a camera lens, Jeff was hoisted into the air and against the ceiling by a support beam of the attic. He was being strangled by something that neither of them could see. As his legs kicked several feet off the ground, he dropped the flashlight. Unable to see, Gary snapped a series of photos to be able to see Jeff. He then ran to his aid to try and free him, before whatever this was took his friend's life. He found that it was some kind of cord that had been tied around Jeff's neck and pulled to the ceiling. The cord had been secured by a bent nail that he actually had to bend straight to free him. Once Jeff was freed, he was then dragged as quickly as possible towards the exit as he came to. Jeff would later describe what his experience was like this. I remember feeling myself being strangled, and then everything went black. That dark space of time that I lost, I felt so out of control. Once Jeff was out of the attic, the cord that was noosed around his neck, which had never previously been seen by anyone that had gone into the attic, was found and taken off him. These are photos moments after his exit. As Jeff tried to come to terms with what had just happened, as everyone else was frightened, Barry, the man behind the camera, was attacked next. A surge of electricity from his over-the-shoulder camera shocked him to the point of unconsciousness. At this point, everyone was terrified and knew that they had to leave immediately. As Jackie gathered her son and 4-month-old daughter, she and the rest of the crew began to depart the house as quickly as they could. Jackie's daughter was now crying due to a large red mark on her forehead that came out of nowhere. The activity then began to pick up in the house as they were making their way out. Banging noises could be heard coming from inside the house as they all exited. They would all leave shortly after 3 a.m. this very night. In later interviews, Jackie Hernandez would say, I was in a way forced out by a ghost, but if I would have stayed, I would have been harmed or have had a nervous breakdown. I couldn't see a future staying there. I just knew that I couldn't stay there. It wasn't very long after that Jackie made her departure from the house, a permanent one. It would also be the last time that the crew and anyone else involved would step foot within the San Pedro home. However, this would not be the end. October of 1989. Wanting to get as far away as she possibly could, Jackie used what little resources she had to move to a modest trailer home over 300 miles north of San Pedro to Weldon, California. And although she still feared the nights, she felt as if whatever presence that dwelled within the San Pedro house had been left there. But she would be very wrong. The following year, in April of 1990, one moonlit night, Jackie was woken up by a series of strange scratching sounds coming from inside the small storage shed in her backyard. Thinking it was an animal, she grabbed a flashlight and approached it. As she got to the door and pulled it open, the scratching sound stopped, and an all too familiar sense of fear came flooding back. Although she didn't hear anything else going bump in the night, all the hair on her body stood on end, just like it had at the San Pedro house. Just weeks after this development, Jackie would see a large black mist float through the hallway and towards her daughter's room. Rushing to make sure her child was okay, she passed the threshold of the room and immediately panicked. The comforter in which her daughter was laying on was on fire. Bizarrely, it looked as though someone or something had touched or sat down exactly where the spot was burning. Thankfully, her children were okay after she very quickly extinguished the flames and then snapped a series of photos as evidence afterwards, believing the presence to be back in their lives. The black mist, however, was nowhere to be found. As a result of the past dealings at the San Pedro house, as well as the resurgence in her new home, Jackie began to suffer horrific panic attacks and almost constant anxiety as a result of the trauma that she had endured. She wouldn't be able to breathe when the knocks would begin at night, and they were always in threes. Having kept in touch with the guys who had been documenting the San Pedro phenomenon, Jackie had kept them up to date on the new incarnation. Never having seen this type of haunting before, the crew wanted to come up and see for themselves if this thing, this entity, had indeed followed her to her new home. It was midnight, Friday, April the 13th, when Barry and Jeff arrived. In later interviews, Jeff would say, "Many people have asked me, after what you experienced, why on earth would you go following this woman and her ghosts? The only response I could give is that I was compelled to finish this case. I wanted to see it through to the end, to some kind of conclusion." By this time, Jackie's nearby neighbors had experienced some activity themselves, which only began to take place after her arrival. One incident that happened was that several of her neighbors were moving a new television into their home when the face of an old man with evil eyes materialized in the screen. It was seen by both husband and wife moving it. Word had slowly gotten around after this night. Some of the teenage neighbors in the area noticed that there was an unfamiliar van parked outside of Jackie's house. After knocking on the door and getting the info as to what was happening, the two teens left and quickly came back with a Ouija board, hoping to assist. Given the time spent coming up, the desire to make contact and to try and gain some sort of a resolution, and that it was a full moon on Friday the 13th, the crew thought that perhaps this was their best and only opportunity to contact whatever this thing was and to try and elicit a response. And a response they would get. As they placed the board upon a table that all of them could sit around, the atmosphere was icy cold. At first, nothing happened. The board sat there idle, but within minutes, the entire table began to violently shake. The planchette began to move around the board and answer questions so quickly that all they could do was write down letters to try and decipher what it said. The candles around them flickered as if there were people running in the room, creating some kind of vortex. They asked just who the entity was, and it told them. It said it was a man who had been murdered, held underwater, and drowned in San Francisco Bay in the year 1930. They asked how many spirits walk the earth. It replied with, "Phantoms fill the skies around you." Jeff then asked it, "Why are you targeting me? Why do you hate me?" It replied with, "You have the likeness of my killer." They then asked, "Who in this room do you harbor hatred for?" The board then spelled out, Jeff. Within seconds, Jeff himself was picked up multiple feet into the air and thrown into the wall behind his chair. This violence concluded the session. Jeff would come 2 minutes later with an injured back, and everyone would soon exit the trailer to try and make sense of the ordeal. When day broke, it was as if the presence was weakened or went back into hiding within the darkness. Days after the unearthly encounter, Barry decided to take the information that he had gained and visit the News Pilot, the local newspaper there in San Pedro, to look through old articles to see if he could verify what the specter had told them. He soon found an article dating back to March 25th of 1930, where the body of a man named Herman Hendrickson had been discovered. His body had washed up in San Francisco Bay. Police believed he had been a victim of foul play due to a compound fracture in his skull, but due to a lack of evidence, his death would ultimately be ruled accidental. Herman Hendrickson was a seaman who worked upon a lumber company vessel known as the Astoria. Feeling compelled that he was onto something, Barry then took photos of the cord that had been tied around Jeff's neck in San Pedro to the local docks to ask around. Upon speaking to an elderly and career fisherman, he was told that the knot was a bowline knot, a very common knot that had been used on the seas for hundreds of years. It was as common now as it would have been in the 1930s and prior, and that whoever had tied it had been connected with the ocean in their profession. Given the resurgence of the supernatural in her new home, Jackie's patience was paper thin. She decided once again to move in June of 1990 in hopes of leaving the entity behind for good. She would relocate back to San Pedro and move into a small apartment home on 7th Street. Not wanting to take any chances, she had a local priest come in and bless her home before she and her family would live there. But again, horrifically, it had moved with her. From the very first night, the same phenomena began to rear its ugly head again. From lights flickering, objects moving on their own, and balls of light materializing and moving throughout the room, Jackie was once again plagued by an ethereal force. But she wasn't the only one. Every time the guys would return from a separate investigation, a photography shoot, or anything in between, they too were met with odd happenings. The first and one of the more worrisome things to happen was that their gas burners in their apartment began to turn themselves on and ignite. Following this continuous show of power, it began to rearrange and move objects such as photographs. It then began to scale in intensity in the weeks to come, as an unseen force broke multiple windows and began to place furniture upside down. It would eventually reach a crescendo, a blitz of violent and vulgar displays. About 50 different items were moved with Gary from the previous investigation also being present, alongside Jeff and Barry as witnesses. In the middle of the action, in an effort to communicate once again, a letter and pen was placed in the middle of the stove at approximately 3:58 a.m., only to have the burners be turned on by themselves, and the letter moved and ignited within 5 minutes. Whatever the entity was, wanted them to know that it was there and that no one's home was sacred, and whatever doubt that was once present had now been extinguished. When the case initially began in 1989, No one could have predicted the longevity and persistence of the paranormal phenomena that was to take place and just how many people it would affect. Today, Jackie Hernandez still experiences minor bouts of spirit activity, but things have long since calmed down from the days of 1989 and through the 1990s. Thankfully for her now, she's able to exhibit a relatively normal life, although her fear of what could be lurking in the darkness still sits in the back of her mind. But before we go, I do have some questions about the case, some that you may be asking yourself. But ultimately, although I will propose these questions, the conclusion is yours to make. Just what caused the spirit to haunt the home in which Jackie found herself in San Pedro? If it truly was a drowned and tormented soul who harbored hatred as it claimed to be, why would it find a residence over 400 miles away to haunt? And why would it pick Jackie of all people? Or could it have been anyone at that specific time and in that specific place? Could it have been the fact that she was vulnerable, or something else? She also claimed to have never opened any sort of doors or dabbled in any sort of occult activity, although most of the time that is the way these entities find their way into our world. But perhaps later on, when they asked and received their answers via a Ouija board in the Weldon home, maybe they allowed the spirit to become more present. Although it bothered other people like the friends and neighbors of Jackie, and followed Jackie to multiple residences, perhaps it was strengthened through this process, considering for a time the manifestations seemed to become stronger. Although many people consult a religious leader, like a priest, to try and cleanse a home or rid themselves of these kinds of entities, why didn't that work when Jackie moved into the final apartment on 7th Street? Could the entity have perhaps attached itself to her? Or, and although there is no evidence to support this, could her husband or relative unhappy with the divorce have placed some kind of hex or curse upon her? Just some food for thought as to how she found herself in this position. One of the more uncommon traits of this haunting, and one that still baffles me and others alike, was how was human blood plasma able to seep from various areas within the house? And just whose plasma was it? I've yet to find another case where this has happened. To me, it's absolutely bizarre. But then again, these aren't normal things that we're dealing with. These events are supernatural. So therefore, what doesn't make sense to me perhaps makes sense in the grand scheme of things. And lastly, was it even a human spirit at all? Or could it have been something from the demonic realm? Considering the knocks, especially in the trailer home, came in threes, this is usually indicative of the demonic, not to mention the manifestations of power and the clear violent and malicious intent. Along with these many questions, we still find ourselves with even fewer answers than we'd like to when it comes to this now infamous case known as the San Pedro haunting. But a few things are for certain. These things do exist, and whether you believe based on what you've seen or learned, or you're a hardened skeptic, sometimes it takes the other world staring at you directly in the face to convince you otherwise. And your fear, your vulnerability, can attract and feed the things that go bump in the night. And perhaps fear of the unknown is a well-placed fear indeed.
As of 1993, Jackie had reported that paranormal incidents had dwindled to only occasional minor oddities, nothing like the fury of before, essentially indicating that she was no longer living in constant fear. However, the psychological scars remained. Jackie admitted that she was more scared of dying than she was before, haunted by the idea that the spirits she encountered were living in hell, and that such a fate might await others after death. Paradoxically, she also felt a strange gratitude for having witnessed something so extraordinary firsthand, saying that, in hindsight, I think it was fortunate to see and experience something that most people never get to. Her children, fortunately, were young enough that they were largely unharmed by the ordeal. Samantha remembered nothing of it, and while Jamie had a lingering fear of sleeping alone, and one incident of being levitated or thrown against a wall, he was otherwise fine as he grew older. Jackie's close friendship with her babysitter Christina did not survive the trauma. Christina found the events so disturbing that she became deeply religious afterward and preferred not to speak about the haunting at all. She observed that Jackie was never truly the same following the events, describing her friend by 1993 as jumpy, overreactive to everything, and struggling with what sounded like chronic anxiety. The two women drifted apart once the daily battle with the supernatural was over. The haunting, it seemed, was the only true thing that they had in common. Meanwhile, the San Pedro bungalow itself did not quietly fade back into obscurity. In 1996 and 97, Jackie, Barry Conrad, and Dr. Taff returned with a TV crew from the program Strange Universe, a 90s paranormal investigation show, to film a retrospective. They interviewed the new property owners, who revealed that subsequent tenants also reported eerie phenomena in the house. In fact, the owners said that the longest any renter had stayed after Jackie was about 6 months. People kept moving out due to disturbances. Tenants had experienced flying objects, or objects moving on their own, the sound of disembodied voices, and unseen forces that sometimes pushed or attacked them, much like what Jackie had described. During the Strange Universe filming, the crew themselves heard loud knocks and thuds from the attic, and their modern audio and visual equipment repeatedly malfunctioned inside the house. However, the same equipment worked fine outside. This was striking confirmation that something unexplained still lingered at the old bungalow years later. Even late as 2008, there were reports among neighbors that the house was still haunted, suggesting that the legend had only grown with time. Today, the San Pedro haunting has cemented its place in local lore. The case is sometimes referred to as the Hernandez poltergeist house, and it's cited as one of the most intense hauntings ever recorded on the West Coast. The San Pedro haunting stands out not only for its high strangeness, but also because it sits at the crossroads of multiple theories in paranormal research. Was it a genuine ghostly infestation, or a case of reoccurrent spontaneous psychokinesis centered on Jackie herself? Investigators on the case were split on this question. Barry Conrad and Jackie favored the interpretation that external spirits were at work, specifically the ghost of Herman Hendrickson as the malevolent force, and possibly John Damon as the benign source. They had historical data, Hendrickson's death and Damon's grave, and the subjective Ouija board communications, supporting the idea of actual entities seeking attention or revenge. Dr. Barry Taff, on the other hand, leaned toward a different explanation. He believed that Jackie herself might have unknowingly caused the phenomena via psychokinesis, or PK, triggered by her emotional turmoil. Taff noted that the disturbances began during an extremely stressful period in Jackie's life, amidst a separation, a pregnancy, and single parenting, and seemed to diminish as her life settled down, a pattern consistent with many poltergeists studied scientifically. In his view, a living person's subconscious mind could project energy that produces physical effects, such as knocks, object movements, apparitions, and much more. Jackie may have been the initial agent of this PK, and the effect may have spread to others like Jeff, Conrad, or Tina as they became entangled in the case. The San Pedro haunting remains a remarkable case study in paranormal research. The case encompassed everything from traditional ghostly apparitions to poltergeist-like kinetic activity, and even hints of demonic oppression, or what some may call obsession. But despite being deeply frightening, it provided a wealth of evidence that researchers still analyze and debate to this day. In the end, whatever forces were at work gradually subsided, allowing those involved to return to a relatively normal life. Jackie Hernandez survived her ordeal and moved on, but the story of what she and others endured continues to intrigue and spook new generations. But yet to this day, over 30 years later, There is still no consensus as to exactly what happened. However, what is clear is that whatever did occur was extraordinary, and that extraordinary thing happened to a very ordinary person in San Pedro. The case remains an open mystery that straddles the worlds of believers and skeptics. As the Los Angeles Times headline aptly put it, Jackie was followed by puzzling and persistent ghosts. Whether those ghosts were literal or figurative, they left behind a story that was as chilling as it was fascinating, and that it truly was not a story for the faint of heart. Thank you guys so much for watching this latest episode. I truly apologize for the wait, as always. I've been sick for like a month. It's been one thing after another. It seemed like I had 2 upper respiratory type viruses, and then I either had a flu-like bug or the flu itself. I'm not sure, but I'm still kind of coming out of that just now. But with that being said, I really and truly appreciate your guys' support so much more than you know. If you could do me a favor and hit the like button, comment your thoughts below, subscribe if you aren't already, and share this around if possible. All that stuff helps me out tremendously. Please also consider grabbing a copy of one of my books from my merch store shown on screen now, and take advantage of the Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales both there, and I'll also link it down in the description alongside the link to today's generous sponsor, which I urge you all to check out and grab some awesome headphones for yourselves. I'm forever grateful, guys, truly, and I will see you again very soon with another brand new episode. Until then, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Please stay safe out there and take care.